It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast. Here we are once again talking all about your property news around Australia 7 days a week. Of course, you can hear us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Amazon. The middle of our working week, Wednesday, November the 13th. And this morning, I thought that we could examine some key observations and trends for the 2024 year, including having a look at a standout suburb in Australia. Also, we want to have a look at some of this recent data that is telling us that building a house now takes 50% longer than it did 4 years ago, with overall build times for all property types at their highest since 2010. Rising material and labour costs, unfortunately, they haven't gone away. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, average build times this year were 13 months for houses, 16 months for townhouses, and 33 months for apartments, reflecting significant growth since the pandemic. In fact, apartments and townhouse construction timelines are around 20% longer than pre-pandemic levels. Are you experiencing blowout times with your build times? If so, let us know. Join in on the conversation. The email address is myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com because we would love to hear from you. Right now, though, we're heading to Sydney to catch up with Margaret Lomas once again from Destiny Financial Solutions. And Margaret, you've been busy dancing, causing a bit of a storm in the hip-hop, jazz and tap, which I didn't realise that you did, and you won a competition doing it.
Yeah, we've won several competitions now. We're a group of ladies who range in age from mid-20s right through to mid-60s, which is, of course, me. We danced when we were younger, as kids do. We just had our normal after-school dancing, and all of us have a love of dancing, and we formed a group. We're led initially by a former tap dog. If you're old enough, you'll know who the tap dogs were. They're a very famous men's group who took the world by storm and dancing in construction clothes and on construction equipment, and they were really quite the troupe. And we've kind of evolved. We all started just doing the tap. We evolved then adding jazz. We all did that. But then we all started to learn a new genre, which was hip hop. And a lot of people might think, well, you probably look a bit lame, a bunch of old ladies jumping around dancing hip hop. But because we're also committed to dancing, and we danced when we were younger, and we all, I guess, have dancing as a skill, we actually aren't that bad at it. And last year, our teachers said, well, we need to put you in some comps. So we went up to a fairly large competition that's held up in the Central West in Bathurst. And there was about 17 hip-hop crews in the category that we were in. They didn't have a specific category for older people. We had to go against all the teenagers. And I guess much to the shock of everyone in attendance, we actually won the entire thing.
Wow.
And yeah, we've been on a current affair recently. Some people may have seen that, because we just all love dancing so much, and we're not bad at it, as it turns out.
Well done. You were saying something about Prague next year.
Yes, well, there's the World Tap Titles are held in Prague every year, and they have a group section, a group category, and our teacher, Darren Disney, was up there in Prague this year for the titles. He was an Australian coach, and he watched the groups and said, you know what, you ladies can definitely compete in this group. So we're talking about going to Prague next year.
Wow, well, good stuff, because it is such a fantastic way of keeping fit. I had an ex-girlfriend of mine who was into jazz and all of that fast dancing. I mean, I didn't know how she did it, but she was super, super fit as a result.
Well, I do 3 hours on a Tuesday night. as I said, the oldest in the group, there's a 60-year-old and then a couple in their 50s and a lot of ladies are in their 40s. But I've got to say, the three pillars of aging really are mental stimulation, community and fitness. There's diet as well. I don't get any of that through my dancing, but the other three I do. So I've got a great community of people that I dance with and we're very close with each other. I get the fitness for sure from that. And whenever I go to a physio, they're always amazed at my flexibility, particularly for my age. And then, of course, you're getting that mental stimulation because we've got to remember all of those routines and get them right. So the choreography can be quite tricky to learn, especially when it's difficult choreography. It's a great way to age, and you have so much fun that it doesn't become a chore to go out and exercise. And I think that's the key to being able to stay young.
If you can find some sort of fitness that is not a grind on you, like a lot of people don't go to gyms for that very reason. Right, well, we should really knuckle down and talk about some real estate because this morning some of the observations and impressions for 2024, which there are many, Margaret.
Definitely. And I've got a couple of my own to throw into that mix. And I think one of the critical things about moving into 2025 and what we've learned from 2024, and as we slow down toward the end of the year, we're definitely seeing a lot of changes in auction clearance rates. Some of them are getting down to around the 30 and 35% auction clearance rates. And that's not just a function of the time of the year. Traditionally, auction clearance rates will slow down toward Christmas time. But we're starting to see the effects of just overpriced markets now and people suffering from a cost of living crisis and just not being able to afford to make the high offers that they made back in 2022, 2023 and early 2024, where people were able to come in and if there was a property they wanted, they would just smash out whatever offer they needed to make in order to get that property. We're now not seeing that here where I live. We've seen a couple of properties surprisingly passed in at auction, properties that I would have said absolutely would have sold and probably for over reserve 6 months ago even. So we're seeing a definite change in marketplaces all around Australia at the moment. And it brings me to an observation that I've made, and I've made this in the past in other years where we've seen a similar market temperature, and that is that it's really critical to start to consider what I like to call ripple suburbs. And I don't know, have you heard that term before?
No, not really. So, talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, so a ripple suburb is where you isolate those suburbs that have done exceptionally well in the last 12 months, but now have reached a point where the affordability factor starts to cut in fairly sharply and we get less people moving in that market. So we recognise those markets by ones that have had not only good growth over the last 12 to 18 months, but those markets which now are slowing down in their auction clearance rates and that are increasing in their days on market. And then what we do is we draw a little circle around that suburb up to around about 5 to 10 kilometres, and we look for the suburbs that haven't had that impact yet, those suburbs that didn't grow as much, those suburbs that may have been the slightly less favourable suburb over the ones that did really well, those ones where not as much demand has been in that market, because we can fairly reliably expect those markets to now get the attention. If people can't live in their suburb of choice, they start to become happy to live in the next to suburb of their choice. And it's very often that we see those surrounding or ripple suburbs do really well, and often even better than that main suburb did, because they come off lower bases, they're more affordable, and we suddenly get more people moving in that market, often quite unexpectedly.
And since we're talking about these suburbs, let's grab your biggest standout suburb in Australia for 2024. What would that be?
So I'm now talking about a suburb that started to come through fairly quietly, but I think has much more to come yet, because I think that's important. It's easy enough to look around the country and to pinpoint the standout suburbs. I own property in a couple of the Adelaide ones where prior to 2024, they'd been fairly quiet, and I gained $150,000 in value in a very short period of time in them. And that includes the northern suburbs in the less desirable part of Adelaide, up and around the Elizabeth Market, and certainly down the southern suburbs in the Onkaparinga Shire. Those suburbs did exceptionally well in a very standout. Over to Perth, we've got those suburbs also down in the southern suburbs, the more affordable areas that went from a $350,000 house to a $500,000 house in 12 months. And if you're thinking percentage increase, if you have a $350,000 house that goes up by $150,000, that's a significant increase in its intrinsic value over maybe $1 million house that goes to 1.2. So there are a couple of the standout areas, but one of the very quiet areas that has come through that has been up and down over the past 10 years is actually Townsville. We're starting to see a big culture change in Townsville. We're getting a lot of infill and infrastructure development by councils so that it becomes a real lifestyle choice to live there. Certainly a place where a family can be raised in a really, really good lifestyle that you just couldn't afford to have if you were going back to one of the capital cities. And there are a number of areas within Townsville that seem to be more favoured by others, including Castle Hill. Alligator Creek, interestingly enough, I'm pretty confident that there's probably no alligators in Alligator Creek, but there could be, and Bowley Plains. So they're the kinds of areas that people are starting to look in and really getting a great sense of community, lots of services for families, but also that lifestyle is coming into Townsville as well.
Okay, so you've heard it from Margaret. Take a look perhaps at Townsville in 2025. Now, at the start, Margaret, I was talking about this recent data showing that building a house now takes nearly 50% longer than it did 4 years ago. I mean, that is just a staggering number.
Absolutely. And I think now the average build time for a house is around about 12 to 14 months, I think, at the moment. That won't surprise people down in South Australia. It's always been that long to build a house there. I've built a couple of houses there and always been very shocked at how long they take, but it's always been quite the norm. But certainly in the rest of the country, I built a house a couple of years ago in New South Wales that only took 5 months to build, and it wasn't a small house. It was a big house. So the problem with it is that, of course, if you're building a house and you're using finance to do so, you need to be drawing on that finance as you go to make progress payments, and you're the one footing the bill for that. And if it's income you're after, then you're not getting income. And if you're paying rent elsewhere because you're building an owner-occupier, it can get very costly, and it makes it very difficult for people to get to the end of that build period, especially once they're 80% drawn on the loan and paying almost a full repayment while they're still paying rent or another mortgage elsewhere. So they've certainly blown out a lot, and it's the result of many, many things, including a problem that's been building for the last 30 years. And that problem is that we just haven't provided enough incentives for people to take on a trade. There's been so much focus on parents sending them off to university to often get degrees that they just don't even use, Bachelor of Arts and other degrees that don't get used that much in the marketplace. And meanwhile, we haven't seen people take on those basic apprenticeships and TAFE courses. And so we have a severe shortage of labour who can build these homes for us.
Yeah, that is something that we addressed about a month ago. So go hunting for that if you're thinking about taking on one of the trades, because we did break that down in a earlier podcast. All right then, Margaret, I'll leave you to your hip-hop, jazz and tap. And thanks so much once again for jumping on the call. And it's going to be a very busy 2025, no question.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. There's going to be plenty of opportunity. And I think next time we meet, we should talk about the opportunity that's going to be coming into the market in 2025.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.